Hello and welcome to a spooky edition of Rant Rave Reviews. I will be doing a different video about spooky stories, whether they be books or movies or video games or whatnot, throughout the month. Some more focused than others, but anyway, this was supposed to have been last Sunday's video, but I was really busy, so I didn't do it. But I'm going to do this one now, and then you'll get another one on Sunday. Yay, bonus. So, today's video, I'm going to talk about spooky, not necessarily horror, but spooky books. Yes, because people often ask, what's a good fall book or a good fall read, or, tis the time of year, tis the season, and we all got to get spooky, and yeah. So, let's start off with a versus, specifically in classic literature, Dracula. This isn't actually Dracula, it's Dracula's guest in short stories, but Dracula versus Frankenstein. What's my opinion? Dracula's way better, hands down. This is my slight rant. I'm not going to rant too much in this video because I mostly like these books, but I don't like Frankenstein. And I don't get why people like it. I'm just salt. Okay. Let's talk about Dracula, and then let's talk about Frankenstein. Let's compare and contrast. So Dracula, if you've never read it, you probably have no idea what it's actually like, because movies are like, Mina Harker is this human, and she falls in love with Dracula, and I don't know. Yeah, okay. That doesn't happen. That does not happen in the book. First of all, in the book, basically, Dracula's hanging out in Transylvania with his 3 creepy wives who eat people like you do. But people in Transylvania are wise to what's going on. They're doing the evil eye, get away from us, you friggin' vampire. So he hires Jonathan Harker, a random real estate agent from England, to sell him some land in England, because no one in England in this time period knows about vampires. Bram Stoker hadn't written Dracula, so people weren't wise to him yet. So that's what happens. Dracula goes to England and starts, eating people, etc., etc. So, Mina Harker, who you've probably heard about if you've seen the movies, is Jonathan Harker's wife. They are in love, by the way. She's not in love with Dracula. She never is. I don't know why they put that in the movies, especially because the way Dracula is portrayed is really, not creepy, but gross. Almost, because when he's in Transylvania, he's all dry and cracked and creepy. And then once he's in Britain, he's much more fleshed out. And you're oh, he's basically a giant tick full of blood. That's not attractive. That's not a youthful young man. That's a disgusting bag of blood in human shape. Yeah, he's never described as a good, normal looking person. He's never, no. He does vampirize a few people. Well, 1.5 people throughout the book, so you're So there is not attraction, but a allure, charm. He uses his vampiric powers basically to brainwash a few people, but not in the way that movies show. And the one guy, oh my goodness, he's this mental patient named Rensfield. I love him so much. He's I'm gonna be Dracula's minion. Oh no, I don't want to. And I'm I love this person. You just read the book, you'll understand. Anyway, so Mina Harker, at some point, does have this weird psychic connection with Dracula, but she uses that. Dracula's trying to use that to, bring him to her. She uses it against him to be here's where he is right now, you guys. And by you guys, I mean her husband, this one Texan cowboy dude who's, a side character, this beautiful Dr. Seward. He's never described as beautiful, but he clearly is. He is in charge of a mental hospital where Rensfield, the mental patient, is. And, of course, Dr. Van Helsing, who's this old professor who's I know about vampires and stuff. That's cool. It's fun. It's neat because it's written, actually, as epistolary writing. My cats are destroying things. Anyway, it's written as epistolary writing, which, if you don't know what that is, it's written as letters. So, for example, the first chunk of the book is Jonathan Harker kind of diary entries and writing to Mina. And then there's newspaper clippings of, oh, this mysterious break-in, what's going on? there's a ship's manifest where they found the entire crew dead. And then Mina's notes, basically, of the meetings between, you know, basically the Vampire Hunting Society, more or less. So it's a very interesting way of writing the story. It's way cool and very, like, not innovative, because there are other books that do that, but it's unusual. You don't see it too often. Yeah. Also, you have a strong female character. Mina Harker is a total friggin' boss, and she's great, and she's, like, pivotal to what happens in the book, okay? That's Dracula. You should read it. Yay. Then we have Frankenstein over here. It was written by a woman, but that doesn't mean it's actually, like, feminist or anything, because, like, the only woman in the entire book is basically like, I'm here to get married and then murdered, and then she gets stabbed, and then she's dead. Like, I don't get why people think it's this amazing feminist thing, because even though it was written by a woman who was, like, sleeping with a famous author, it's not, like, it's not actually that groundbreaking in terms of, like, women, and, like, female characters, and I feel like, and here's the thing, people always, like, freak out whenever a woman is the first to write such as a novel. It's like, women are almost always the first to write novels. The first novel in human experience, Tale of Genji, was written by a woman. There are several different genres, which, like, the first iteration of whatever genre was written by a woman. Just because you're the first doesn't make you the best. If that were true, then the best talking picture would be The Jazz Singer, and if you've seen The Jazz Singer, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Being first does not make you good. So, Frankenstein, not good. Also, not the first horror story, by the way, but, you know. Also not the first sci-fi story, but, you know, whatever. Yeah. In terms of, as my brother pointed out, too, people act like she, like, made all this stuff up, and it's like, we have ideas about golems already. Like, golems, like, creating that kind of a thing, already a thing. Conrad Dippel, apparently, was this alchemist from, like, the area related to Frankenstein. So yeah, it's like, you're already drawing from folklore. So let's not pretend like this is some new magical thing. Okay. But that's, like, meta. Let's not look at the meta, because I don't know, you know, I don't care about the meta that much. Let's look at the actual story. It's not that great, you guys. If you've read it, you know that it could be 1/3 to 2/3 shorter and be a much better book. Because it's written as this, like, frame story and a frame story and another story that doesn't need to be there. So the frame story is Dr. Frankenstein is on this Arctic boat trying to escape from this horrible creature. And the people on the boat are like, dude, what are you freaking out about? And he's like, oh, let me tell you. And then it goes to the actually interesting part of the book, where he is, you know, investigating bodies and life and, you know, being a mad scientist like you do. As my sister pointed out, there's an awful lot of him packing his bags, but we can ignore that. It's okay. We can ignore that because the core of this part of the story is, like, experimenting on monsters, etc. Cool. Good. This is a good little chunklet of story. You'll notice this is the part that did make it into the movies, and that was a wise choice. Okay. He makes the monster, like, goes, freaks out, and then, like, runs off. And Frankenstein's like, holy cow, maybe I shouldn't have, like, sewn together a bunch of corpses. That was a really bad idea. It's like, what do you think? Okay. Oh, meanwhile, he's also, like, getting married to some chick who doesn't matter because what are women? Yeah. And then, this is the coolest part, okay? Like, it blew my mind when I was reading it. He, like, I don't know, he doesn't get married quite yet, but he's on this, like, vacation to the Alps or something, and he, like, sees from afar on the mountain this hideous creature, like, shamble to him, and he's like, oh no, it's the creature that I created. And the creature comes up, and he's like, hey, Frankenstein, did you know I can friggin' talk? And I was like, as a reader, what? Like, what? He can actually talk? That's crazy! Okay. Now let's pause. Up to this point, you have a pretty decent book. Even though you don't need the Arctic, like, frame story. Decent book. I think we're in the first third. Okay. Rather than being like, hey, my strange creature that I'm horrified by because you're made of corpses, how can you talk? And the monster being like, oh, I, like, paid attention to this family. Moving on with our lives. No! Why would we move on with our lives when we could have an entire third of the book focus on the monster, like, skulking outside this house and listening to this family and all of their drama and their entire freaking history and, like, learning language that way. And we have to learn about all these characters who do not matter, and it doesn't matter, and it's so freaking boring, and it's horrible, and it completely stops dead everything else in the book. And people who say they love Frankenstein and, oh, it's so scary, clearly didn't read this part of the book. Like, they must have skipped it, or they read an edition that didn't have it, or something. It's so dull. What is the point of this part of the book? There isn't any point. This is the old-timey writing thing of, like, I get paid by the word or something. I gotta, like, cram out, like, lots of pages of nothing. It's not important. It's not thematic. Nothing matters. And it just, the entire third of the book in the middle, you don't need there, okay? Okay. Moving on. Okay. So then, back to, like, things that matter. The creature's like, so anyway, I can totally talk and, you know, ignore all that stuff that I just said because it's not important. I think that you should make me, like, a lady creature because, yeah, I mean, come on. And Frankenstein's thinking, like, he's horrifying. A lady creature would also be horrifying. Assuming they could even reproduce, like, that would be horrifying. I'm not gonna make you, like, a lady creature. And the creature's like, well, okay, I guess I'll just murder your close friends. Is that okay? And Frankenstein's like, ooh, please don't. And he's like, oh, also, I'll be with you on your wedding night. Wink, wink, wink. And Frankenstein's like, what does that mean? I don't understand. And it's like, gee, do you think maybe he's gonna kill your wife on your wedding? Is this supposed to be suspenseful? I don't know. Anyway, so he doesn't make him a lady monster, and then the monster, like, kills one of his, like, closest friends. And then he still doesn't make him a lady monster, and the monster kills his friggin' wife on his wedding night. Who'd have thought that would happen? And then basically, like, the rest of it is, like, Frankenstein, oh, we're back. Oh, he has to run away from this monster because the monster's horrible. And then he's on the ice, and the monster's on the ice running, and he's like, bye, Arctic boat people who are in the frame story for no reason. I have to escape from the monster. Bye. And they're like, bye, dude. And he, like, runs from the monster. The end. Why do people like this book? Did you read the book? If you like this book, legitimately, did you actually read it? Or did you read, like, the Cliff Notes version? Or did you skip the chunk outside and the chunk inside? Also, people who are like, the question is, who's the real monster? And I'm like, the real monster is the person who's like, I'm gonna kill all your friends and family unless you give me a girlfriend. Which is interesting because the Bride of Frankenstein actually addresses that, of like, there is a lady monster and she's horrified by the other monster. And it's like, hey! Because maybe if you, like, create somebody with free will, they might not automatically, like, want to be your bride. Hey, like, good job. The friggin' movies are better than the friggin' book. But anyway, don't read Frankenstein. It's super fail. Sorry I spoiled the whole thing for you, but, like, honestly, it's really predictable the whole time. You can see what's gonna happen. Read Dracula instead. Okay. That's 13 minutes of our lives. We're not going to get back. Okay, moving on. So those are, like, the classics. Shout out also, if you want a, like, feminist short story that's really friggin' creepy, The Yellow Wallpaper. That is a good story. It's like, are they ghosts? Or is it something else? Or maybe it's both. Anyway, I'm not going to review that because you kind of give away the entire, like, spookiness. But Yellow Wallpaper. Read it. Okay, moving on to more modern times. So when people ask for a Halloween read specifically, so like Dracula, I wouldn't say is a Halloween read. I would definitely say it's a spooky read. Halloween, you gotta go with my man Ray Bradbury. Something Wicked This Way Comes. If you've watched my Dust Witch poem video. You've already heard me, like, rave about this, but I'm gonna rave about it again because I love it so much. If I could marry a book, it would be this book. I'm listening to it on audiobook for a book club I'm doing this month. It's still perfect. Like, it's such a good book. A, because Ray Bradbury is a friggin' poet. Normally, I hate flowery writing. I hate it. But his I'm okay with. Like, he's basically, I always said this, he's a beat poet pretending to be an author. And I accept that. It's super good. If you don't know what it's about, essentially it's this small town, Greentown, Illinois. These two 13-year-old kids. It's kind of like their like story of growing up, where one of them is very like innocent still, but he's kind of like, you know, realizing things are changing, and then the other one is like much more like, I want to grow up right now. Like, meanwhile, the dad of one of them is like nostalgic for being a kid. He's really old. He was 40 years old when he had his son, so now he's 53, and he's just like, I'm old. You know, nostalgia. So that's like the main good guy characters. And then you have the creepy characters. So in this little town, this like carnival literally blows into town one night at the end of October. And there are these creepy carnival freaks and this illustrated man who's like covered in tattoos. And it's like Cougar and Dark's, I forget what it's called, like Pandemonium Sideshow or something. So you have all that, you know, circuses are inherently creepy. Like, let's be honest, okay? It's creepy. And like more and more of the adults start like disappearing and weird things are happening. You're like, what's going on? And it's like, there's this carousel that can perhaps give you your youth back, but at a weird cost. And it's just great. It's super good. If you've seen the movie, it's very similar to the movie, but kind of different in terms of what happens and the way they defeat the bad guy. I like it in this movie. It's interesting too, because the reason I like it as a spooky story is you have these carnival freaks, and not very soon, but you know, they're obviously not human. Or are they? Well, they're obviously something. And at the end, it's like, here's what they might be. And you're like, okay, but what is that? And it's like, they just are. And that is how you should write a spooky story. Like, I hate when it's like, it's another dimension. I'm like, boo, who cares? The other dimensions aren't scary. It's no different from being on another continent. Or it's like, aliens. I'm like, no, boo, no one cares about aliens. Aliens are just like people, but from a different planet. No, I want, like, these things exist, and they're creepy, and you don't know what they are, and they're just there. Like, sometimes a weird carnival blows into town, and people start disappearing. That just happens. Deal with it. That's the nature and the fabric of the universe. Sorry you don't like it. Yeah. I will talk more about that probably in my next video in terms of, like, things that I like and things that I don't like in spooky stuff. So anyway, okay, so highly recommended. Read it. Oh my gosh, read it. You can also find a really nice red cover. It's like circusy and creepy and cool. 10 out of 10. Okay. If you want more about that, watch my video about the Dust Witch, because I already talk about it a bunch. So that's mid-century. That was, I believe, it was written in the 1950s or 60s, 62, I think. Then I don't have it with me, but the actual only horror book I'm gonna just talk about, just because I read it recently, is The Exorcist, which, I don't know, it's definitely horror, but I feel like it's more like repulsive than scary, if that makes sense. I've never seen the movie, so I was kind of going in blind. I was like, I know there's a scene with green vomit. That's all I know. It's really like, oh, I wouldn't even say creepy, just like, oh, if that, I don't know what that facial expression and noise, I don't know what that would be called in terms of human speech, but like, that's what you get reading it, which I like, because if you know about like actual demonic possessions and such, it's not like in a bunch of these scary movies where like, I'm the ghost of some dead person and I want something stupid. It's like, no, like, you're a fallen angel and like, you think humans are stupid, so you're just gonna like be a jerk to them. But in like a horrifying way. I'm actually shocked that The Exorcist has not been banned more than like, I think like 2 or 3 times. I'm like, oh my, there's like trigger warnings for everything. So I recommend The Exorcist if you want just like a really unsettling book. But trigger warnings for like sexual abuse, child sexual abuse, violence, language, like holy cow, it's horrifying. but in an interesting way. Yeah. So yeah, that's the only like horror one I'm gonna talk about. I don't really read that much horror. Everyone wants to like marry Stephen King, but I don't, for reasons I will not go into here. But so yeah, I don't read that much horror, but that one was definitely like, yeah, that face. That should be the thumbnail. Yeah, anyway, okay. So to make it so this video isn't like 1,000 years long, I will talk finally about the most modern of all horror. No. r/no sleep, which is Reddit, which if you've read my thoughts on horror video, I talk about how great it is. I like it because it's just little dumb short stories, and they're written as if you're supposed to think that it's real people writing on a forum, as if this actually happened to them, even though everyone knows it's fictional. So it's like we're all in on the game. It's like people telling scary stories, and it's just fun. And again, like 99% of them are kind of meh and forgettable, but every so often you find like a gem, just a gem, and you're like, yeah, that was good, and it's creepy. I also like it because it's on the internet, of course. It's rife with, spelling errors and grammatical stuff that's weird and things that don't make sense. Which is fine, though, because if it were really a forum where people are writing their actual experiences, like, that is the way it would be. So it's kind of this very weird, I don't know, medium. Like, it's definitely textual, but it's more participatory, if that makes sense. Not to be all, like, pretentious sounding. But, so that's just like a shout out, like, go read r/no sleep, it's really fun. Shout out to, that is how I discovered this series, Tales from the Gas Station, which is small town supernatural horror. It's not too horror-ish, but it's like a little spooky, and I very much love it. It's the kind of genre where you're like, I like work at this gas station at the edge of town, and it's gross, and sometimes weird things happen here. And it's really funny. The author, who's not actually named Jack Townsend, but like, that's his pen name because it's the gas station at the end of town, and his name is Jack in the story. It's great. It's super funny. Like, holy cow, this author is insanely clever. This is like the one I'm going to talk about probably like, I don't know, give the most shout outs because he's just a newbie little indie author. And he's amazing. I can't believe that, like, somebody hasn't picked this up yet because, my gosh. I actually got in on the ground floor of this where I think I started reading No Sleep just as he finished this chunk of stories. So yeah, it was really good. He has a few short stories online. He has a website as well, which I should probably link to. I'll link to it. But then the books have extra stuff. And it's funny too because there's certain things where he had to change it a little bit. And sometimes it makes sense and sometimes it doesn't. Like, there's one character, like, friggin' dies, and you're like, why is he not dead in, like, this short story later on? Okay. But he kind of, like, talks about it, but again, it's one of those things where you're like, it's like he had to change it for the, yeah. But anyway, so, it's funny, and, like, creepy also, and there's a little bit of mystery each time. This one, the first one, is, like, 10 out of 10. Like, just read it, buy it, read it online, and then buy it. This is what I did. It's really worth it. Like, worth it. Worth it! And then, number 2 is also really good. It takes place, it's funny because this one I think takes place, like, around Halloween. There's this, like, it's funny too, because if you read the online version, it's like, we don't talk about what happened on Halloween, like, we just don't. And then in here, you find out what it is, and it's, like, so much weirder than what you'd ever expect it to be about. This one takes place, I believe, at Christmas, which is why it's like, but there's a demon and, things like that happen. It's also interesting because there's certain recurring characters and then there's certain new characters, and it's a rare book where I actually like all the characters, and they all have very distinct voices and personalities. And Marlboro is my favorite one. You'll know when you read it. Anyway, it's just great. AKA Jerry. It's just great. But here's where I have to have my rant. I'm sorry. the third book came out, and I didn't like it. Oh, I feel so bad saying this, but, like, I think there's a reason I didn't like it. And the reason is because the first, I would say, like, half of it, he released online. I think it was, like, I was interning at the time, so it must have been 2 years ago. He released the first half of it online in individual chapters. And this is, like, this arc, the third arc, is this invasion of the body snatchers thing. So it's like, you don't know who to trust. You don't know what's going on. You don't know who's behind it. There's at least 2 different people, like, with things happening. And it's like, what is happening here? Like, holy cow. And then it's brilliant because, oh my gosh, you should just read it online. I think it's called How We Got Here. I think that's the arc. So it's this whole invasion of the body snatchers thing. You don't know who to trust. You don't know who's going on. By the way, the other part of this is it's not just this guy who works at a gas station. It's this guy who works at a gas station who, like, can't sleep. No sleep. He has this, like, genetic disorder where he, like, can't. And so he's slowly going crazy, too. And he never really knows, like, did I hallucinate that? Is it, like, something actually supernatural? Like, did I, like, lose part of my day? Like, I don't know what's going on. Which is really fun. It plays with, like, you know, what do you know, what you don't know. And then in the body snatcher arc, it's like, cranked to 11. Because you're like, how much is he hallucinating? And how much is real? And, like, you know, it's, like, really intense. Anytime you combine body snatching with, like, mental illness, I'm like, this is a good formula. But anyway, so that arc's going on, and you're like, it's really intense, it's really intense, it's really intense. And then the last scene that he published online was, like, devastating, but also flipped everything you thought on its head, and you're just like, and it was one of those things where he stopped writing for a while. Like, he would put out little short stories, but they weren't related to that arc, which, if you have an arc in a book, it basically went like, whoop, and then it just stopped. And so you, the reader, are like, okay, it's so dire. Like, how is he going to get out of it? Like, how is this going to be okay? There's actually an out. There was a little window where I was like, here's how part of it can be okay. I think this is, like, how you could deal with it. But then in the book, and so for 2 years, by the way, for 2 years, you're like, how is this going to be okay? Like, how can you fix this? This is so awful. Like, all of this stuff. Holy cow. But then in the book, it's like, fixed. And I was like, oh, no. Like, it's so unsatisfying. And I don't know if it's because there was that 2-year wait, so it made you want something more, like, crazy. Or if it was, like, legitimately unsatisfying. Like, it just seemed like the way the character solved the entire, like, devastating situation that everyone was in was just like, and it wasn't really like that. The author tried to make it more meaningful, but it just wasn't satisfying. I was like, no. And also there was, like, a really creepy existential, like, I don't agree with, like, the way he fixed certain things. I was like, that is creepy and I don't approve. But, okay, end of rant, because I do love these books and I do love the author. There's going to be a 4th book someday, and I'm hoping, I think there is, you say there is, I'm hoping that will, like, address some of that and maybe show that some of the things that are, like, okay now aren't, but we'll see. I trust him. There's definitely some mysteries where you're like, that seems a little suspicious. So yeah, I'm hoping that it's not as tied up in a little bow as we thought. Like, fingers crossed. So, yeah, that's my 2 cents. But again, like, the first 2 are, like, gems. This one's, like, really the best, and then this one's pretty darn good, and then the first half of the third one was so good. So yeah, just read it online. But yeah, 10 out of 10. Support this author. Buy his books. He also has them as ebooks, so that's how I read the third one, as an ebook. I don't know if I'll buy the third one in print or not. Anyway, that's it for spooky books and things. Next time, spooky movies. Yay! So have a fun Halloween month, and check back on Sunday for, like, hopefully a more coherent thing. Bye-bye.